you doing, guys? Fox Racing. How's everything going? I hope your family's doing well. I'm doing okay. Things are going back to normal here in the city. I see a lot of people around and about doing their business. Guys, I just want to shoot this video. I know I've been on hiatus for about a week, whatever. I just want to shoot this video to let you know that previously I actually uploaded one of my videos not that long ago, and I kept mentioning about AB5, that the California decided to actually, even at this point, what's his name, the Attorney General Xavier and three other attorneys from different cities in California, I think Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco, they decided to go ahead and file a suit against Uber, Lyft to classify the driver as employees. But you know, Uber, Lyft is still define and the gig economy, they still define the state of California. And at this point, you know, I don't know if you guys heard about TNC, which is Transportation Network Companies, that they were. It's a legislation that actually passed back in 2012, right? And it was acted up. It was enacted in some of the cities, some of the states, but in some of the states they never acted on it. And the only state that actually acted on it at this point, it's maybe I'm sure it's Massachusetts, Texas, and Colorado. That means all these drivers that they work in these states, they have to get a TNC license in order for them to actually be able to drive for Uber, Lyft. Although I know in some of the states, since TNC it's not really regulated, that I'm sure that in California, you guys comment here some of the drivers in California, because I know for sure as a driver, you would have to come up, if you own your car, you would have to get a sticker from the Transportation Network Company in order for you to be able to transport people in California, especially if you work for Uber or Lyft. Here, let me tell you something. I mean, you guys, I've always been mentioning this before in my videos about the weird things are in New York City here. We in New York City, like I said, we've always been as employees, because the fact that we don't work for Uber, Lyft, we work for Taxi and Limousine Commission. So Taxi and Limousine Commission, you know, it's almost like it's equal what TNC is. It's just here in New York City, it's different, because Taxi and Limousine Commission, they were well, I back in the early 1900s, it's the same thing. People, they used to actually buy cars and use them as a taxis, but yet there was no enforcement there. There was no Taxi and Limousine Commission back then. So people, they used to get a tax stamp from the city, and they used to display it on the windshield as like sort of an inspection sticker, and that's how they were able to actually transport people back in the early 1900s as the taxi drivers in the city. And eventually, at one point, back in 1960s, I think 63, that's when the Taxi and Limousine Commission was inception of Taxi and Limousine Commission started. And that's how people were in order for you to actually be a taxi driver, you would have to go to Taxi and Limousine Commission in order for you to get trained for at least 3 weeks to a month and get a test before actually you'd be able to allow to drive for Taxi and Limousine Commission. And that's how TNC does it in certain states, because TNC only legislation that been passed recently back in 2012 through the lower 48 and through the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C. So like I said, now, you know, Uber, Lyft, they have no choice, because the fact that that now officially that Uber, Lyft or drivers or employees in California, and the fact is because there's a Public Utility Commission, right? Plus, whatever the lawsuit that the state of California decided to file against Uber and Lyft, you guys, the Public Utility Commission, it's in every state in the lower 48. So what they do, they oversees all as far as the utility companies, the gas companies, transportation companies. So that means, like, if you have any complaint against these utility companies, you know, or or something happened, you're riding the subway or the bus or whatever, you could call the utility company, you could call the Public Utility Commission, and they will file a complaint on behalf of what if you submit a complaint, obviously they will file a complaint on behalf of the complainant, and they will submit it to different branches in the city, as far as like if you're talking about the bus companies or the utility companies, like a cable company, gas company, electric company, and that's how they will probably more likely resolve your problem. Because I know that 311 it's a number that you call, and once you get an operator, they will transfer you to the appropriate places where you can file your complaint. Like here, it's the same thing, like when people drive for us, when we get passengers in the cars, most of them are not aware of what's going on. They only want it to be, they want to get from A to B, but there's someone above Uber, Lyft in every state. You know what I'm saying? So if I were someone in the backseat, requesting a service, and if something happened in my car, I'm more likely not gonna file a complaint especially when it comes to New York City. Like for instance, like most people, they tend to actually file a complaint with Uber, Lyft. If I were to have a problem with someone in my car, I would submit my complaint to Taxi and Limousine Commission, because Taxi and Limousine Commission have the authority of all the drivers in New York City. But like I said, if someone complains to TLC, it would be more likely a difficult problem, because it will be more likely to be a problem, because you have to go through a process where Taxi and Limousine Commission will ask you to come for court hearing, versus if you submit a complaint to Uber, Lyft, more likely if it's not severe, if it's not something very severe, more likely it will be resolved between the drivers and Uber, Lyft, and Uber, Lyft decided to deactivate your account, then you're in bad luck. So a Taxi and Limousine Commission, if they decided to revoke my license as a driver, I will be done. I won't be able to work for Uber, Lyft. So TNC works the same as Taxi and Limousine Commission in 3 states so far that I know, that these states decided to act up on it. So basically at this point, where if you go to Massachusetts, you would have to get a license from TNC in order for you to display it in your car, for you to be able to actually work for Uber, Lyft. Versus California, I'm sure that California, they do have that TNC, but they never acted up on. But at this point, it's just the fact that if you decided to drive for Uber in California, you would need to get a yearly tax stamp from TNC in order for you to work for Uber, Lyft. But now, it's over for Uber, Lyft. The Public Utility Commission, they just actually ruled out, against Uber, Lyft, and some of these rideshare app-based companies, that they have to classify their employees. They have to classify their workers as employees, and they give them an ultimatum by July 1st. That means July 1st, if Uber, Lyft, and the rest of the gig economy decided not to follow the labor laws and not to contribute to the employment benefit for their workers, then more likely Uber, Lyft, they'll be looking to get their license revoked by July 1st. So honestly, guys, I did upload my video before, not that long ago, and I've been talking about this AB5, and like I said, even in my previous video, that I said that even before this rulemaking that took place, like July, June 9th, it was just yesterday, I think, where they decided, the Public Utility Commission decided to go after Uber, Lyft by making sure that they classified the employees as the driver as employees. So at this point, they have only to July 1st, like I said, and like I said, in our case in New York City, there's no such thing as TNC. We have Taxi and Limousine Commission, and Taxi and Limousine Commission oversees all the for-hire vehicle people here in the city, and especially taxis. And without taxi limousine commission in New York City, you won't be able to get on board with Uber Lyft. And like I said, Uber Lyft, they stopped hiring drivers a year and a half ago. Where taxi limousine commission actually forced Uber Lyft to stop hiring drivers permanently. There's no cars. You cannot drive for Uber Lyft in New York City. Although maybe if you go to other states, you could apply and get on board with Uber Lyft. But now at this point, even though like we were, the only thing why I'm saying that the fact that we almost as employees in New York City is because we work for Taxi limousine commission, and we allowed to file workers' compensation if in case we lose, we get laid off or something happened here in the city, as far as like New York City. But the only thing is, like I said, since we almost as employees, the only thing that we're not qualified for is the unemployment benefit when it comes to health insurance and when it comes to unemployment benefit, just in case if we lose our jobs. So guys, I just want to shoot this video. Like I said, and I'm gonna link some of the PDF about the ruling that took place on June 9th about the Public Utility Commission, and also the TNC, which is at this point what they're trying to do in California at this point is TNC. They have to enforce all these rules where in July 1st that Uber Lyft, they have to comply with the state of California and comply with the TNC. With TNC now, they're gonna force Uber Lyft to submit all the trip sheets. Like as far as like, let's see if I'm driving in New York City. Back then, I don't want to get off the subject here, but TNC, what they're gonna be doing at this point, come July 1st, is that they're gonna make sure that all drivers have to, it's going to be electronically, basically, where they're going to have to track every driver in California, where they have to actually Uber Lyft, they must submit all these trip sheets of all the drivers electronically. I don't know if it's going to be like weekly or monthly or daily, where they have to track all the drivers and make sure they know each trip that each drivers execute in California. Like for instance, like here in New York City, back before, we still, technology wasn't up there at this point where now we have these apps. Back then, back then in early 90s when I drove yellow cabs, we used to have, since there was no GPS, we used to make sure that every trip that we take, we have to log the trip on our trip sheet, where you could write it down manually, and at the end of the trip you will have to submit all your trips to the fleet that you work for. But now Taxi limousine commission has a GPS on all the taxis, and they track every driver. Like that means if you're in taxi, if you're in yellow taxi, if you drive, if for instance you're in New York City, right, you came here on visit and you got in and wanted to drive, you held the yellow cab, right, you get in the car, you drove, the guy took you from A to B, and you on your way out you lost something in your car. So if you lose something in your car, obviously if you don't have the medallion number of that car, which is like sort of a hard plate number, which is in New York City, we have same plates that all says TLC on it. If you got out of the car, you lost something, you weren't able to actually catch that license plate, then you back then in early 90s, you're out of luck. You're not going to be able to track your belonging. But nowadays, you basically, all you have to do is just call 311. They conduct you to Taxi limousine commission, and Taxi limousine commission, all they have to know is where the guy picked you up, where the guy dropped you off, and that's the only way they need to know in order for them to track the driver where you lost your belonging. And more likely you will be able to get your belonging back. But back then, there was only trip sheet. You have to write it down, so Taxi limousine commission, they had no clue of. So now TNC, they're going to have to force Uber Lyft to submit every trip electronically to the TNC. So in order for them to track the drivers, as far as like, because obviously back in 2018, there were almost like 1,300 sexual claims that was submitted to Uber Lyft, and which really in California, they won't be able to track the driver unless if that person that was sexually harassed was able to call and make a complaint with Uber or Lyft. So more likely they will figure out who the driver is, because the technology, with the GPS, because Uber and Lyft track every drivers, as far as the GPS. But now TNC, they're gonna get involved, where they want to make sure they enforce these rules, where they get all these electronic trips submitted to them. So far, guys, I predict this, and I always been saying about, as far as like what California wants from Uber, Lyft, and gig economy, and this is gonna be enforced. And if they don't follow the rules, more likely they're gonna get their license revoked, and they're gonna get they're more likely Uber, Lyft will get kicked out of California. I don't know if I'm gonna add something to this, but I'm gonna link a PDF of the ruling of the Public Utility Commission, and obviously at this point, because TNC, it's only because I know TNC, it's really acted upon only in Massachusetts and Texas and Colorado. So basically at this point, they whatever that's gonna unfold is when to July, and see what California is gonna do. Is unless if Lyft and Uber decided to keep defying the state of California, which basically they're not going anywhere at this point. All right, so you guys, I just wanted to shoot this video to let you know exactly what transpired here, and I will talk to you soon. All right, bye. Take care, guys.